just to start, this is based on my 3 kids. So my kids have all graduated now. So in the upper left was just an art curriculum that we had bought, Atelier Art, and they were all doing an art lesson. On the bottom left was I wanted to teach them the character trait of your words matter, and you can't take them back. And so I gave them each like shampoo and toothpaste and things they had to squirt out. And that was so fun. They were so excited. They each were very focused on getting everything out. And then I said, put it back. Like, put the toothpaste back in the tube. Put the shampoo back. And they couldn't. And there was the lesson. You can't take your words back. So when you call your sibling a bad name, it's there, even if you say you're sorry. So that was one of the lessons beyond the textbook. It wasn't just read about the character trait. It was make it real. My kids were very involved in 4-H, that's the top right, and then very involved at our church, the Church of St. Paul in Ham Lake, where they do living stations. So just to give you a quick intro about them. So my name is Cindy Goldaddy. I homeschooled those 3 kids. They've all graduated now just as of 2023. And my newest role just 7 weeks ago is I became a grandma. So I'm super excited to be in that role and to be able to watch a newborn go through all their developmental steps. I have taught infants through high school, and I teach at the Homeschool Cooperative in Lino Lakes, Arches. I teach career explorations, which is an elective, and it helps the high schoolers figure out and explore what do I want to do when I grow up. And we have a lot of fun in that class. I also am an instructor at the University of Wisconsin in River Falls. I teach in the early childhood department and the Montessori graduate department. And I teach about the brain all around the world. So I thought this talk was an hour and a half long. It's only an hour, so we're going to have to go super fast. I have way more content than we have time for, so we'll kind of breeze through infancy. But my question was, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did my kids struggle because of their genetics, or did they struggle because of their environment? What caused the challenges that they have? So the firstborn was super skinny and scrawny. His grandparents called him a string bean. He had colic. I had mastitis. We were on antibiotics the whole first 6 months. So was he born with a sensitive gut? Or did those first 6 months create the sensitive gut? So there's the chicken and the egg, right? The second one was stuck at birth, had a difficult birth, and then a difficulty with latching, sucking, and swallowing. Are they related or are they unrelated? I don't know. He had a lot of ear infections, lots of antibiotics, lots of hives. I don't know which one came first. The youngest was born C-section. She was fully breastfed with no infections, but she reacted with her first round of vaccines. So what caused that? Chicken or the egg? And now that they're all adults, it's really easy to look back in hindsight and be like, oh, I can see the pattern. I can kind of make educated guesses now that we're past that stage. So in early childhood, I was running a Montessori school. I had my first waiting list. I thought life was so great. I was going to send them off to school, and I was going to run my school. And that oldest wasn't ready to go to school. I'll just keep him home 1 year. Montessori easily can stretch into elementary, right? Then I kept him home 2 years. And then I kept the other one home a year. So that meant I had 2 kids that were beyond the Montessori materials. Pretty soon I closed my school and I just homeschooled. So in childhood is when I really learned that individual paths are made one step at a time. And that's also when I learned to capitalize on their interests. And so that's what I want to share with you today. During this time, I also started teaching at the university a class called Alternative Methods, and my students had to write a final project and had to include a mission statement of if you had an ideal school, what would your school include? And all those undergrad students said, well, Mrs. Goldaddy, we think that since you're bringing your kids you're going to homeschool them, you should also do a final project, and we'll grade you. So here was my mission statement that I wanted to use best practices from a variety of educational methods, and we wanted to experience life within the family unit. And part of that assignment was, what's the role of the child? So for me, the role of the child in a homeschool environment was to complete the work plan and do what was expected, to be inquisitive and ever curious, to move and explore, to discover how the world works, to share what's been learned, and to actively participate in family life and decisions. So here's a picture of my daughter. Parents, her grandparents had just butchered a chicken, and she thought you could see the brains if you looked inside the beak. So that's that, be inquisitive, be ever curious. She was really into science and biology. That was her interest level. She didn't need a book to be interested. And then the role of the adult, I wanted my husband and I to invite active learning, to create a constructivist learning environment, to support success by teaching time management, to also check that lessons are being completed, and to teach direct lessons when necessary, not automatically. And so here the kids really wanted to get rabbits, and so they are building a rabbit hutch, and you can see who's running the power tools there. And to me that was really important, that the kids were doing the work. They were learning geometry, math, problem solving, deep touch, because to get a drill or any equipment to work, you got to press hard when you're working on grass. And I'm going kind of fast because I want to get into each of their unique experiences and show you transcripts and show you some very specific things. To me, transformative learning experiences were super important. And two of my points, it's okay to change direction. It's okay to pivot. We learned that a lot in 2020, right? During COVID. Pivot, pivot, pivot. So if something's not working, do something else. You don't have to be married to the curriculum that you buy one year. You can pick a different curriculum. And then it's okay to focus on one topic for an extended period of time. And we have that freedom as homeschoolers that we don't have to say we get 8 days of learning with this topic and then we're moving on to a new topic. So I have an example I want to show you before we move into each of their unique experiences of a project-based learning that we got really stuck on, and it's 13 years later, we're still doing it. The kids were at home, and then we found a homeschool co-op, and we went to that co-op, and it was 3 days a week. I thought God had answered all my prayers. I was going to keep my Montessori school open. My kids could go to this co-op 3 days a week. Life was great. And then the co-op moved from Lino Lakes to Roseville. So we moved with. Well, that meant I had to work there to make it worth my time to stay down there. I couldn't drive and spend my whole day driving. So I ended up working at the co-op. The co-op became a 5-day-a-week private school, so we did that as well. And then at junior high, we came home, and we pulled all kids out. And we came home to homeschool full-time. So that was part of that, it's okay to change direction. And then to focus on something for an extended period of time. So when we came home, we focused on chickens. I grew up on a farm. My job was to take care of the chickens. I do not like chickens. And so this was one of the essays one of the boys wrote, and I'm just going to read you the top couple sentences. During February of 2013, I read an article about chickens at the YMCA. Excitedly, eagerly, and elatedly, I exclaimed to my family, "Let's get chickens!" They thought it was spectacular, and Dad replied, "That sounds like a first-rate idea, Nathan." This was their idea, that they, with my husband, were going to get chickens. They were going to build a chicken coop. They did that all winter long. They upcycled reel trailers because we're an underground drilling company, so we have a lot of reel trailers. They learned how to weld. They did fencing. They researched breeds. They researched what you do with baby chicks, and it was amazing. Here we go. So the chicks came home. Husband was gone to work. I had to go get the animals that I don't like. I had to bring them home. It was too cold to live outside. They had to live in my garage. And then as they got older, you can see the hoop coop that they built back there out of recycled reel trailers. And you can see they were free range. They ate the big weeds that we'd pulled out of the raspberries. We waited months and we finally found an egg. And then we had too many eggs, so we had to do marketing, how to sell eggs. Everyone had to build flyers. That was an assignment. So all of this was without any textbook. This was all just following their interests and making assignments of a very integrated curriculum, all the subject areas. During this time, some of the mistakes that they learned was you can make a PVC feeder and chickens might die in it. It doesn't mean your feeder was flawed. It means your chicken had a low IQ and didn't know what to do. We learned that the ramp they had made under the solid part of the hoop coop, the only way to close the ramp was to crawl under it in the chicken poop and lift the ramp up. So they learned how to use pulleys and make pulley rope systems from outside. So there was a lot of cause and effect, a lot of hypothesizing, a lot of evaluating, a lot of experimenting that went on. Then they learned how to butcher chickens. Should we do it ourselves? Should we haul them across the cities down south to the place that butchers chickens? Should we have some guy bring his trailer in and do it in our yard? What's the best way to do it? We learned about predators. We live in the swamp up by Forest Lake. There's a lot of predators in the swamp. So we learned all sorts of things that can happen. So our middle guy, Aaron, was our resident animal lover and our resident animal expert. He's now turning 24, and he still is an animal whisperer. He's very gifted with animals. He's a horse trainer. He's empathetic, intuitive, connected, and he's the one I want to start with because no one ever starts a story with the middle child, right? We always start with the oldest or with the youngest. We don't ever start in the middle, so we're going to start in the middle with him. So this is Aaron, and Aaron really taught me that embracing challenges leads to growth, and that faith fuels our unique journey. So when Aaron was a preschooler, kindergarten, young school ager, he had Lyme's disease, and that was before Lyme disease was known. So he had all these tests, they all were negative. Doctors thought I was just a crazy mom. I had a kid that couldn't walk some days. He couldn't go down to his bed. He couldn't get in his bunk bed. He had Bell's palsy. He couldn't close his eye for a whole summer, so he couldn't swim. He couldn't sleep. He'd have to hold his eye shut. He couldn't suck out of a straw because his mouth didn't close. So he taught me a lot, and he taught me you cannot learn to read when your brain is fighting for its life. You cannot learn academics when you're in survival. So I really kept learning about the brain during the years that he was young because I was wanting to support his life. This picture, this is the 7th grade camp out at our church. When you're between 6th and 7th grade, you go to a camp out and you get white-faced and you learn how to do this experience. Just to back up, we went to VBS when he was a kindergarten first grader, and we left VBS and went straight to the hospital with his Lyme disease, and they admitted us for a whole weekend. So we had a lot of trauma attached to VBS. We didn't return to VBS until 7th grade. We skipped 6 whole years because of that experience. And it doesn't mean anything was wrong with VBS. It was just the trauma attached to the experience that we weren't able to go back as a family. It was traumatic for the other 2 who went to grandma's and didn't see mom for 2 days. It was traumatic for Aaron. It was very traumatic for me. And we moved 7 days after we got home from the hospital. So there was a lot attached to that. So for Aaron, he didn't figure out reading till he was 12. 12 years old. So how many of you have kids that are between 6 and 12 that you're worried about because they haven't figured it out? There's still hope. Like, I just kept working with him and kept giving him strategies and kept going beyond the textbook and not getting stuck on curriculum for him. So now, as a young adult, he still cannot spell. And he just knows that. That's not my gift. I can get horses to do things no one else can get a horse to do, but I can't spell my Facebook posts. And that's okay. So Lyme disease really introduced us to unique learning opportunities that challenged us. It fostered resilience. It fostered creativity in my teaching and in the kids' way that they learned. This is a picture of him under his bunk bed when we moved and he was putting his bunk bed together. And I love it because it looks like he's in jail. And that's what it felt like those years with Lyme disease. It felt like we were in jail, like we were in prison. And we didn't know how to get out because there were no books written then. And the internet was just coming out. Like I didn't know how to research things on the internet. So it was really a challenge. And what we did is we accommodated him with a lot of reading aloud, a lot of audiobooks, and as YouTube came out, a lot of YouTube. Because that's how he learned, through his auditory center and through his whole body. What he couldn't get with his eyes, I didn't want him to go behind on every subject matter just because he couldn't read. I still wanted him to do science and history and art and music and Phi Ed, even if the reading was a huge struggle for us. So here he is now, living the dream, and he just wants to let you all know, hint, the dream is not the 3 R's. His dream is not reading, writing, and arithmetic. And so this was in Texas last year when he was showing, and it's my parents and myself and my husband. And I wanted to give you a couple clues before we look at his transcript, that in 5th and 6th grade, he did a lot of outdoors. All of elementary, he did a lot of nature-based learning. We went to homeschool cooperatives. We had tutors who met him where he was at instead of judging him for what he couldn't do. And one was Mrs. Sivula. I know she was a science teacher who made the kids journal every week. Now, he couldn't write very well, and she didn't judge him for that. He could draw pictures of the horse pasture and what he noticed, and then he could write it in his very way of writing. And she accepted it. And she still talks about it to this day. She's like, and then there's the kids that just observe a pencil, where he would go out and observe the horses. He would observe the grass, and he would observe the way the wind moved things. He would observe how many squirrels were in the pasture. You know, you need to find those adults in your child's life that can encourage them and help them grow. We also explored a lot of different curriculums. I was always looking for the magic one. I discovered there is no magic one. I had to make my own. It was eclectic what worked for us. And that's okay. And if my kids didn't like a book that I'd chosen or a curriculum, I was like, that's fine. In Waldorf education, you build your own textbook. So here's an empty binder. Make it happen. Show me what you're learning in equine science. Show me what you're learning here. Show me your chicken learning. And that's what they did, that they built their own. And Waldorf, if you've ever looked at Waldorf education in elementary, they do have kids build their own textbooks for every subject. Geometry, math facts, language, all of them. We also did a lot of Reggio-based learning, which is project-based learning. So we would take an interest and run with it and do very integrated curriculum around it. So Aaron's interest was horses. He would do all of his literature, history, math, geometry, science, social science, art, music was all around horses. And I have a cedar chest full of some of the different things he wrote and different things that he did with horses. What did we do in high school with him? So I have the 4 years, freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. So I just wanted to show you the different ways to be creative. How do you record? If you're doing something beyond the textbook, how do you record it? How do you prove it to someone? So you can look on the left, the things that are in the white box. That's pretty traditional subject matter, right? Geometry, physical science. Well, then animal husbandry. You know, I attended workshops here at this conference and at Mache by Sherry Frame and Linda Lopez, and I can't think of the other ones. But I kept all of their information on how to be creative with my subjects. To me, I put in the description that I wrote for animal husbandry. He was an equine learner, farrier, veterinary, equine chiropractic, skills that he gained from job shadowing. So every job shadow, we counted that as hours. He did poultry care. That means he hatched chicks, he sold eggs, and he culled the herd, the flock, not the herd. He culled the flock when there was a bad rooster or naughty or a sick chicken or whatever. He cared for animals. That meant he kept fences in repair, and he built animal shelters, so there was construction. He did lawn care, winter prep work, snow removal. If you're going to have animals, you have to be able to get feed in, and so you need to do all those things. So get outside and shovel. That all made up for him one credit, which is what, 120 to 180 hours of coursework. And then I think the rest is pretty typical. So his sophomore year, we just changed animal husbandry to equine studies. And then what did that mean? This included daily hands-on horse care, feeding, worming, grooming, riding, training. He learned all subjects of the horse systems, all the different systems. He learned about diseases, parasites, nutrition, farrier, first aid, eventing, breeds, and he was part of Horse Bowl and 4-H. So he was learning all this for a competition. But I let him count all of it as learning, because this is where he would read. He wouldn't read anything else I gave him, but he would read this, and he would study these big, huge books. I thought that that was worth the whole credit. It was definitely over 120 hours. And then his junior year, we ventured into PSEO, and if you haven't done that, you have to do your research if that's appropriate for you. I'd done it with the older child, which you're going to see in a minute. And so for him, we're doing PSEO. I'm a master now. I've been in it 2 years. So we get him enrolled, and then at the end of fall semester, he came up to us and he said, you know, I would like to go to farrier school and not do PSEO. And I said, I don't like that idea. And my kids always knew if they wanted to do something, they had to write a proposal. And so that got them writing all the time. So he wrote a proposal on why he should go to Farrier School. And then I had him look it up. He's too young. I said, oh, phew, I'm off the hook. I don't have to be the bad guy. You can't go. And he knew some of the teachers there, and he said, what if I call and ask them for a variance? He didn't like to make phone calls, so I said, yes, do it. Well, he did it. And he got the variance. And so he dropped out of PSEO spring semester. He did 12 weeks at Farrier. He graduated the top of his class with all these adults. He came home and studied out of a college-level vet tech horse book every day. And I gave him all these credits for it. So some of it was taken straight off the Farrier website. But I figured foraging, they did 6 hours a week times 12 weeks is 72 hours. Ooh, that's not quite 120. He came home and he sat out in the shed that whole entire winter foraging and learning how steel works and how to make different. He did steel art. He entered steel art in 4-H at the fair that year. Wine glass holders made out of horseshoes that started with straight iron. So I gave him a whole credit. I thought, wow, I can't do that. And then equine science, a little bit different than the one the year before. 8 hours times 12 weeks, 96. And he did homework and studying at home. The big one was the Farrier field work that they went out with their instructors every week to different barns and worked on real animals, trimming them. And so that was way over. That was 180 hours. And so look at how he built his spring semester. I just thought that was a very cool thing. And then the asterisks are showing what he did in the fall semester at PSEO. So he was really, looking at getting his entrepreneur degree. The other thing to notice on here is the key at the bottom, that if you're making a transcript with your kids, you want to note where different things happened. And so you give a different key if they take a class at one school and another class at another school, you just make a different symbol. And then his senior year, what were we going to do then? He's already got his Farrier certification. He's done some PSEO. He wants to go work full-time. I want him to finish high school. We had a bit of a conflict in our house. And so we compromised and we met in the middle. For him, I added a class called Entrepreneur Business. And the course description that I wrote just said job shadowing every Thursday for 4 hours. He got to take a trip to the Snafflebit Futurity in Texas and stay with some trainers. He learned about advanced training, adding cattle to the facility, handling insurance, budgets, and management. COVID struck in the middle of that year. And so he transitioned to purchasing a Farrier trailer, shadowing 2 farriers, working with cattlemen, setting up roping practices. All of that counted as entrepreneur business. Okay, so it was all learning how to run a business. And then I gave him a half a credit for record keeping and tax prep because that was really separate from entrepreneur business. Like he had to learn all the things, spreadsheets, all the things he hated about school, he had to do it. And build formulas and track receipts and all of that. And then creative drama, that's what the pictures are on the right. So creative drama, at our church we do living stations and the coordinators choose a Jesus every year and he was chosen to be Jesus in 2019 and 2020. It was a 2-year role back then. And so this was 2019 at the end of his junior year, and 2020 it got canceled in the middle of the practices. But you can see that Jesus is a really emotional, graphic role to have. And so I gave him a half a credit for all of the practice that he did and all of the time and energy, emotionally and physically, spent as Jesus in that role. So altogether, there's his transcript for the 9th to 12th grade. And this one is built off of myhomeschoolgrades.com. They were a website that had just come out back, around 2010 probably. And I liked them because you could track activities, you could track events and courses. And you could write your course description in there, so then now when it's years later and I'm wondering, what was entrepreneur business? I could log in there and copy and paste it into here. It was all written down, what I had created. So if you ever get questioned about a class, you really do want to keep track of that, of you made that up. What were you thinking that year when you created that? Because if you ever get questioned, it's good to be able to look real solid and professional and like I did know what I was doing, even if you're kind of making that happen afterwards. All right, so was that helpful? Are you getting ideas of how we moved beyond the textbook? Okay, so Aaron did figure out reading. He's still a farrier. That's not his favorite thing. Horse training is his favorite thing. He's a reining cow horse trainer. He travels around the country. He has a barn, 30 acres up in Stacy, so he's doing great work. So the oldest, Nathan, he was the one that was the string bean when he was a baby, skinny and scrawny. And as we entered middle school, he had always played football. He lived for football. It was his absolute favorite thing in the whole world, professional football and his own football teams. And he was little. He wasn't going through puberty yet. And if you've seen high school football teams lately, like they're 250 pounds, every kid, at least over 200 pounds. So he was way little. And he started throwing up all the time. Day and night, he was just vomiting all the time. So he had to drop out of football because he was too sick. And also it was the end of 8th grade and you had to go to high school football, and we live right on the border of 2 school districts, and the school district we'd been in the whole time wouldn't sign the variance to let him be a homeschooler coming across the border to play at the high school or even to be a manager. So we got mad and stubborn and said, then you're not doing football. You're not healthy. God's giving you a sign. When God closes one door, pay attention. So we just prayed there would be another door open, and it was 4-H. That's when we found 4-H, because we had now come home from being at that co-op, and 4-H really helped Nathan come out of his shell and find new opportunities. So we really learned how to follow the teen with this guy. And by the way, he was the oldest. I had no idea what I was doing. When I pulled him out of that co-op to come home at 7th grade, I was scared to death. I don't specialize in teens. I'm an early childhood professional. I don't know what to do with 13-year-olds. God is a way of letting you know what's in your best interest, and so it all worked out. So for him, it wasn't Lyme disease. For him, it was gut health. All that vomiting led us down this road of, wow, with DNA testing, you are one marker away from celiacs. You cannot eat gluten, ever. So even when he became old enough to drink and he explored beer and different things, that's a bad idea. That makes you sick. So he knows exactly what alcohol he can drink if he wants to drink. And anything else is not worth it. And he knows that. So for him, health and wellness really challenged our family, because it was my belief, if one person has to do something, the whole family's going to rally. There's not going to be someone sitting alone at that table eating gluten-free and we're all going to eat spaghetti over here. We're going all in. So it challenged all of us, and it led us to performing arts, and we still tease him that he's Nature Nathan, and he's who we know and love today, and it all happened in this 7th, 8th grade time. So Nature Nathan is now an ag teacher in a public school system in west central Minnesota. It's hilarious. He never stepped foot in a public school. He was never in FFA, and he's the advisor, and he takes those kids on national trips every year, and he loves his job. For him, you don't have to read all these. I was going to go in and delete this, but for freshman year, there was 3 things I wanted to point out to you. So remember, he's the oldest. It's the first time I've done this. So music, art, and guitar. I gave him a whole credit for the arts. This was my beginning course descriptions. They're not very professional, but again, they were just my notes. I didn't know if anyone was ever going to audit me and ask for proof. And so he had weekly lessons for guitar. He also practiced in his room. Remember, he just lost football, the love of his life. And so music became his outlet. He would hide in his room and sing and play guitar for hours every day, because that was his processing of this grief of letting go of his sport. And he didn't know what life was without football. He also performed a couple times a year. He was in 4-H in different skits and plays. He performed in 4-H at the state level. He was camp counselor, arts in participant. He sang solos. So do you see how all together it equaled a whole credit? I just abbreviated Family and Consumer Science as your FACS. I made my kids clean house every week. When they all moved out, I didn't know what to do. Like, really? Like, I have to sweep the floor now? They did the house cleaning. They had daily chores, they had weekly chores, they had regular cooking assignments. They each took turns cooking meals so that everyone learned the basic life skills. When I went to college, I didn't know how to do laundry because I grew up on a dairy farm. My mom did the laundry at 4:30 in the morning on her way to the barn. She came in and put it in the dryer in between chores, and she folded clothes and had them sitting outside our bedroom door every morning. I never did a load of laundry till I went to college. And so that was my top thing of my kids are not going to be like me. So they did all their laundry from the time they could match a sock. That was what they did. They also cooked their own breakfast. I did not cook pancakes for the whole family. Everyone prepared their own and their own lunch every day. So if you wanted to make a pizza and invite your sibling to eat pizza with you, that was fine. But I wasn't making pizza for you. They also had to take care of the dog, the chickens, the outdoor yard care. They had to organize their own time, which is part of family and consumer science, by the way. They had to also do money management. All of that fits inside that FACS category. And so I built a lot of soft skills into that, a lot of character building traits. And then Health and Fayed. I gave Nathan credit for this because he was so sick. He was still vomiting all the time. We were trying to figure out what we needed to do. We were going to alternative medicine people. We were going to traditional. We were studying nutrition, food analysis, gut health, reading labels. That's very depressing. If you just want to get sad, go to the grocery store and read labels when you can't eat anything. I remember this was before you could get your groceries delivered to your house, so you had to go to the grocery store, and I would just stand in the aisle and cry. And people would walk by me, and I'd just be standing there, because I'm like, he can't eat anything. There's nothing. He can eat a burger and a fried potato. And that was all he could eat for a long time. So we counted that. In the spring, he trained for a 5K. He attended CrossFit, kettlebell, Tabata, HIIT training, all those things. And all of that counts as your Fayed and your health. And that was created by me. That wasn't going to the co-op for Fayed. That was things that we were doing. I also just wanted to tell you that this was very traumatic. The Health and Fayed was very traumatic for our whole family. Going gluten-free, I had a Montessori school where I had to feed kids on the state-required food program, so I was used to a lot of pasta and a lot of white flour foods, lots of crackers, and to take all that out was devastating. So I replaced it with all the gluten-free products. And that did not make him well. And so then we learned you can't have rice, corn, soy, tapioca. There were 7 other things he couldn't have for a long time. So seriously, we'd go to the grocery store and there was nothing in the center of the store to eat. So that's where I really thought it was worth giving him credit for all the things that we were learning. And the more I dug deep into things and followed Dr. Josh Axe, I found Trim Healthy Mama, which is very gluten-free and whole foods based. And I gave all that to him to learn that you read about this, you study this. Here's 10 recipes, pick one that you want to try this week. Here's 10 more, pick one, until we got our top 10 that we could live with. So the next year, I wanted you to see that I gave him credit again for the same classes. I just changed the description because when you go to PSEO, you can take a choir for a credit over and over, or band for the credit over and over. So I did that for him, that I just changed the descriptions of what he's saying so that I would remember this is what he's saying that year. And then I just adjusted the family and consumer science a little. That was the year that we brought our horses home and he built a pasture. He learned to split wood for money. He built a muzzle loader. There was a lot of other things that came into family and consumer science that year. And then his last 2 years, he was the one we started PSEO with. So if you look on the junior side, he did some PSEO classes with the asterisks. But then he did some other really interesting ones. So what do you think college math prep is? So he couldn't pass his AccuPlacer and get into a college math class. And he kept failing it. So I was like, well, if I got to tutor you on math, I'm going to count it as a math class because you're still doing math even if you're not taking math at PSEO. So it was just math review. That's all it was. It was algebra, geometry, all the things. But we did it, and then he was able to take math. And then the other interesting one on here is biblical history. So again, my kids had to write persuasive essays if they wanted something. He wanted to take a Bible study at church with a bunch of adult men on Bible history and to drive alone to church once a week. He's my oldest. This was not in my norm. And so he had to write me a persuasive essay of what he would learn, what was the curriculum, how many hours was it, and I gave him a half a credit. You know, if your kids want to do things, invite them to convince you that they want to do that. And then the little piece of information here, if you have kids getting into this age, he ended up going to the University of Minnesota. They have an extra writing requirement that isn't in the typical transfer college credits, whatever that thing was called. I can't think of it now. But the U of M has an extra writing course, so he thought he was all set to go right into being a junior at college, but he was missing one class. So as you get kids up into this age, you want to be looking at where they think they're going to school and what are the requirements for that school. So he ended up taking one extra class. So this was his transcript all the way through the 4 years. You can see I had my kids right around 26 to 30 credits, and both boys were above a 3.5. I did give them Bs. They didn't get all As. And especially when they're in PSEO, professors don't care. They're not striving to give your kids all A's. My goal showing you this is that you see there can be a blend of things from tutors, things from co-ops, things from PSEO, and things you make up yourself to round out the curriculum. We'll end with the youngest. Third time's a charm, right? Well, she has a story too. And so I thought there was no story with her. She does have a story. So preschool and elementary for Leah were pretty standard. She was very artsy-fartsy. She just wanted to do art all the time. She could do academics, but they weren't her thing. She was a girly girl. She liked to wear dresses. She was into American Girl dolls. She loved to sew. She liked to make toys out of scrap materials. She was a voracious reader. And then she had some broken bones and some injuries. And so what happens when that occurs? With the middle child, we focused on elementary and that pathway. Then we focused on middle school and how we had to work through gut health with Nathan. So here we're going to look at high school, what happens when you have injuries take over. So what I would always tell her is what my mom would tell me, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You're still here on this earth, even with your broken bones. And so here you can see her right wrist is broken, her right hand. This was when her brother was starting horse training. She went to help him before Mass to do the chores so we could all get to Mass on time. And horses that are in training are usually there because they're naughty. So the horse was in her space, so she went like this. And her bone met the horse's shoulder and broke. So they came back and they yelled upstairs to us getting ready for Mass and said, "We have a problem." And I could tell by their voices something was seriously wrong. This wasn't just a problem. And we came down and we ended up going to urgent care because she had a broken hand. So accidents happen, and don't settle for less. We can still have high expectations when we're recovering. So she's got a lot of things to share with us. When she was in 9th grade, she broke her other wrist. She's a left-handed person, so in 9th grade she broke her dominant left wrist. Really hard to complete your assignments for the co-op when you cannot write. Right at Christmas, at the end of the fall semester, when she was learning to ice skate. And then this one she broke with taking care of horses. So the big thing that happened with Leah after she broke her wrist, COVID happened. We couldn't go do all your physical therapy and everything. And so when she got back on the horse in the spring, the doctor told her, whatever you do, don't fall on that wrist when it's still healing. So of course her horse was fresh, it was bucking. She got bucked off and she went down like a rodeo rider with her arm up in the air and damaged everything internally then, right? Because she didn't use her hand supporting reflex. She didn't catch herself because she didn't want to break her wrist. So suddenly we have adhesions, we have torqued ribs, we have trouble breathing, diaphragm issues. It's COVID, you can't go in for help. I'm sure she had a concussion, hindsight's 2020. I didn't take her in. So we had memory issues, recall, word finding. She couldn't speak. She had a photographic memory as a young child and could memorize everything, and she couldn't do any of that. So this was very challenging for us. During all of that, when we did go to doctors, we were talking about all of her female issues that suddenly appeared, and they were like, well, she just needs to go on the pill. That's what everyone does. That's a terrible solution. And now she's the one that just had a baby. There's just all this learning to happen from that. And taking her to functional medicine, we learned that we could unlock those torqued ribs. We could work on those adhesions. We could help her word finding. We could support her eye tracking. I took her to vision therapy. There's just a lot of work that had to go into helping her finish out her academic career. So one of the things I wanted to share, it just kind of comes up naturally here with her. With each of my kids, we had regular meetings. I would take them to the coffee shop or out for ice cream or just out walking with the horses and hanging out, and we would talk about their plans each semester. What's our goal? What do you think you want to do when you grow up? Like, are we headed to college? Then we should be on this track. Are we headed to trades? Then we're going here. What are you thinking? So I really encourage you, even in elementary and middle school, I did that with Leah, that I always had meetings with her so that she knew where I was coming from, I knew where she was coming from, and we could find a middle ground. So for her, she's the only one that I have records like most of the way through. I don't know what happened to second and third grade. I don't know if I was overwhelmed and didn't know what to do because I had a 7th and 5th grader that I'd brought home. I don't have anything for her for those first 2 years we came back home. But 4th grade. Here's her 4th grade schedule. Are those 3 babies all talking? It's so fun. So for 4th grade, I just wanted you to see, I just did a list of classes for her. You can see a lot of traditional co-op classes, but I also had chores as a class. Faith formation was a class, and I think it's hilarious that she has an F for family and consumer science. So was I tired and never finished out the year? I don't know what happened, but it's so funny that it's the red one on there. That's just the way the records are showing it in myhomeschoolgrades.com. So I left that to show you, you might not finish everything every year. That's okay if you don't finish. The idea is that you were making an effort, right? 5th grade, you can see again a lot of co-op classes. 6th grade, a lot of different co-op things. You can also see for health and PE, I put it as a pass-fail class, so there wasn't a grade attached. Not everything needs a grade. I teach at the university, I'm pretty anti-grades. I'm also anti-testing. In all my classes at the university, we don't do tests. We do final projects. So I want you to prove to me what you know. I don't want you to take a test. And it will be helter-skelter whether you pass or not and whether you retained it or not. Digital media was even a class at the co-op that she took. 7th grade, the one that's highlighted is equine studies. So this is a story I wanted to tell you. This was another proposal. So I wanted to give you a proposal from each kid. She was like, Mom, you're coaching horse bull, you're coaching for 4-H. Like, you should teach a class at the co-op. And I said, you can just do it at home. Like, we don't have to do a class. Why want all my friends there? And so friends from 3 counties that compete against each other in 4-H at Horse Bowl all paid to take a class that I created from nothing. And we called it Equine Studies. And so here you can see some of the things that we did beyond the textbook. Like, there was no textbook. We just built it from scratch. So the upper right, they are doing the circulatory system, trying to get blood to run through all these different parts. It didn't work, but it was really fun. Upper left, they were showing the different events, like how to do barrels, how to do poles. So they used red solo cups and little miniature horses to set it up. And they did inches instead of feet to show the distance between. So they were doing math and geometry and setting everything up. Bottom left is Western heritage and goat tying, and one person had to be the goat and one person had to be the rider. And so they would jump off their pretend horse and tie the person up as fast as they could. Do you see how these are things they're going to remember? And learning how to tie knots, this wasn't in a book. And then I won a skull of a horse as a door prize at a horse bowl coaching seminar. And we named her Cheryl, and I still have Cheryl. And so we labeled all the different bones and parts of Cheryl. And the kids just love that. What a great way to remember. And we still know humans have a lot of the same bones, atlas and axis, C1 and C2, that you get adjusted when you go to the chiropractor. Well, a horse has a C1 and C2, and when that's out of sync, then they don't like the bridle. And then they act up, and they might be kind of bucky and doing crow hops because they're uncomfortable. So the kids learned a lot with that. So remember, I gave Aaron a credit, even though he's not in that picture. He never took this class, but I was practicing at home. I was building the curriculum at home. We were trying it out on the kitchen table every week before the co-op. So I gave him that credit because he was basically doing it as an independent study. All right, 8th grade was pretty typical. That's pretty much everything from co-ops, because she was really into socializing. So she wanted to be with her friends. She wanted to be at co-ops. She did not really love to be home with me. And that was okay. She learned everything she needed. So it was this year in 8th grade, I came here to this conference. I heard Sherry Frame speak about career explorations. And she has a book called Career Explorations. It's in Hepner's booth in there. And I bought the book. I went home and told Leah, we're going to do this. It looks like so much fun. And Leah said, well, I think you should teach it. Just like she thought I should teach equine studies. So I went to a different co-op and asked them, and they said, yes, you should teach it. So I'm still teaching it. My kids are all graduated, and this is the class I still teach. This is the career exploration class. I have expanded it way beyond the workbook that Sherry wrote. So in the fall, I dress up every week as a different career and show up. And we spend 15 to 30 minutes talking about that career. What schooling do you need? What soft skills do you need? What are you good at? What do you hate about your job? What hours do you work? How much money do you make? So we look at all the things all fall semester. So you can see I was an orthodontist, a Walmart worker, a 4-H extension leader, a farmer, a horse show judge, a DNR firefighter, a agritourism specialist, and a construction worker. Those were 8 of the things that I was in the last few years. So this class definitely goes beyond the textbook. And you could do this at home. You don't have to dress up, but there's so much you can research. I find parodies on YouTube. I show the kids a parody each week about a 4th grade teacher. Or there's super funny ones about lawyers. And so I find parodies. We do things to get all their senses engaged so that it's not just sit down and open the book and read. And in the spring of this class, I bring in a different guest speaker about every other week so the kids don't just listen to me. Then they listen to, we had international photographers this year that came in that traveled to New Zealand and Hawaii and photograph weddings, like just make big bucks. And the kids just love being able to talk to different things. We have a cottage baker who's making $12,000 to $24,000 a year making sourdough bread and selling it every week in Anoka County. So this is Leah's transcript. There wasn't anything in particular I wanted to show you, just that she took a ton of college credit. You can see that she took courses at Minnesota State and Community College. She took CLEP tests. She took DSST tests. She took a couple courses at Anoka Ramsey. She graduated with her degree in management, marketing, and sales as she graduated from high school. So she was very committed to graduating with a degree. And that's what it looked like. It was a very complex transcript to create with all those different things going on. And she had, I think, the most credits of the 3 kids because of all those college classes, they count a little heavier in weight. And she also had the highest GPA. Looks like it was a 4.0, doesn't it? They're all 4.0. I wanted you to see all different ways to break it down and ways to record it and document it. Oh, the other one I thought was interesting. Hermeneutics. What is that? Anybody know? So a super sad story. I went and looked it up, and I didn't put any notes down for it. So all it says in there is hermeneutics. I was like, what does that mean? So then I Googled it. It has to do with the Bible and history. So it was a lot of study about the Bible and just learning about memorizing Bible verses, learning Bible history, all the connections. And so I must have been feeling creative and gave it that name. I don't know why I didn't call it Bible history. And so there's Leah. She got married right out of high school and just had a baby 7 weeks ago. So she's the one that made me a grandma. All right, I can't believe we made it through that. I skipped a lot of my notes. So this was my slide if we had a lot of extra time, but I just wanted to encourage you that everything you do is educational, whether you call it a class or not. So this was us at the beginning of school. Every year we would go to the Mall of America, and it was our tradition, and no one else is at the Mall of America on the day after Labor Day, so we could do every ride over and over and over. There were no lines until everyone was green and sick. And then we would eat. That was at Johnny Rockets at the top left when they were into burgers and shakes before we got sick. And then on the right is at the American Girl Doll restaurant when they had a lot of gluten-free, dairy-free, and they could tailor the food for you. Then at the bottom left is when we were done going to the Mall of America. We were too old for that. This is at the State Horse Show, which was often that right around the Labor Day. And then that's her graduation at the right. So the 3 kids have graduated. We have a high school ag teacher, a horse trainer, and Leah is a homesteading mom and a leather tool entrepreneur. So she makes custom Hey Dude shoes. She does Bible cases, guitar straps. She custom tools it herself, and she's taught herself how to do that. Those are not any of my gifts or my husband's gifts. My husband's an underground construction worker. He was an engineer when I married him. He still does engineering. To drill underground, you better make sure that the pipe is going the right way from your sewer. That's his skill. I am an educator, and our kids are all these other things. So I'm hoping you got some good ideas today of how to take your career with homeschooling beyond the textbook. I think that might be it. There you go.